أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن سادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Assalamu alaikum. Can you tell them to try to keep it down in there because I'm doing a video? Yeah, tell them to keep it down. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Khalifa. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I might have to move to another location. they get loud. Alhamdulillah. I might have to go out on the street. Alhamdulillah. Abdul Mujib. Assalamu alaikum. Subhanallah. Abdul Mujib on the check-in. Oh man, I must be doing something right. Abdul Mujib is on the check-in. Mr. Anti-Technology himself. Subhanallah. Yeah, Yahya Abdul Jami. Oh man, subhanallah. I'm doing something right. Subhanallah. Yahya Abdul Jami. My beloved from Philadelphia. Farouk Abdul Haq. Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Share the video, letting people know that we're here. Alhamdulillah. When we did our last live, oh, you drinking coffee too? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Drinking coffee too. Allahu Akbar. I'm about to spill some tea. You know how we say, I'm about to spill some tea. I'm about to spill some tea. Alhamdulillah. During my last, not my last live, well, my last live that I did here when I expressed some random thoughts and talked about, I talked a little bit about the brainwashing of a lot of us and how that affects the relations that we have with people when we interact with them here, especially African Americans when they come here to the continent. I'm watching how the shadows decreasing because as the day progresses, where I'm sitting at, the shadow will become less and less, and I'll be in the sun, even though I'm in my porch. So I'll probably have to move like I did before, and I try to be preemptive about it so my phone won't overheat. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, if you're watching on Facebook, share this video. I think there'll be some important lessons in there. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Let's get our subscriptions up, inshallah, so we can get this beneficial information out. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, so during that last video, brother commented and he requested that I do a video on my conversion to Islam. And while as individuals, you know, all of us are insignificant and not really important. But I think that, especially sitting here on the African continent, I think that a lot of our brothers and sisters here on the continent, when they hear about our stories, a lot of times it motivates them and it kind of like, it helps them see, you know, what a lot of us had to go through to get to where we're at. So I got notes with me, so I'll stay on track. Alhamdulillah. So if you see me looking down, this is what I'm looking at. Even though I don't need notes to tell my own story, but uh, my story is not like some people. You know how some people, when they came to Islam, they like some people they were looking for something. They were, studying different religions, trying to find the right religion. That's not my story. Some people, some people obviously were born Muslim and maybe they didn't take Islam seriously. Then at a certain point, you know, they uh, they became woke with regards to their Islam, and so they started practicing Islam that way. Some people, for whatever reason, like a lot of people, for example, may have had like a serious accident and was on the verge of death. And then Allah gave them an opening at that point in time. And then, that led them becoming Muslim. And that none of those type of stories are my story. Like I don't have like a defining moment that it was like, aha, yeah, Islam is the way. That's not me. I didn't have that moment. And I need y'all to let me know if the background noise gets too distracting or something like that, or the audio or the video is messed up. Let me know, inshallah. Believe it or not, it's not that hot today. It's 90 degrees. I just checked before I logged on. It's 90 degrees. Alhamdulillah. I'm not sweating as much yet, but I still keep my sweat rag with me. Alhamdulillah. So my story, I couldn't tell this story at the time that I was going through it, if that makes sense. It was only after I took Shahada and people asked me, what made you become Muslim? Or what was it that led you to Islam? That forced me to think. And in thinking, I always come to these points that I'm going to mention to you today. So I want to remind you that while this stuff was happening, I was oblivious to it. I was just, living life. It's not until afterwards that I was asked and I think about it that I can enumerate some of the things that I'm going to mention. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. So I've entitled it Planting Seeds and Watching Them Sprout. And if you pay attention, you see why I named it that way. Well, alhamdulillah. I grew up I was born in the early 70s. So, I became basically a teenager in the 80s. New York City. Basically, my background, I grew up in a two-parent household in Queens, New York. Like I said, I was born in the early 70s. And so, my teenage years were the 80s. And so if you're old enough or you know enough about, our era, 70s, 80s, early 90s, New York City, what that looks like. And that's really important for anyone's story, but it's real important because when I think in hindsight of the influences that was around me, getting loud. Hey, y'all. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What was I saying? Anyway, New York City. What was the influences that affected me? Obviously, hip hop. the birthplace of hip hop. And I lived in a neighborhood where a lot of early pioneers came from. I grew up in Hollis, Queens. So you talking names like Run DMC, LL Cool J, Salt and Pepper. You talking about, people like that. And not far away, you talking about people like Rakim. And, on the other side of the borough, you talking about people like Roxanne Shante and MC Shan, the Juice Crew, all that. I'm growing up around all of that and being directly influenced by all of that. If you know anything about early hip hop history, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Khalifa said, I'm not down with YouTube Live, bro. Put me down. I think that I came out when I was in the Sijin or whatever. I don't know what you say. Oh, this thing is getting dim again, like it did before. What's going on? Hold on. Uh-oh. What did I do? All right. Thanks. Yeah, so I don't know why it gets dim like that after time. Anyway, if you know anything about that time period and the birthplace of hip hop, and this is like during the time of the gold, what they call a golden age of hip hop. Who's the hottest artist at the time? Who's at the, you got the Rakims and the Big Daddy Kanes and all of that. These people are 5%ers. For those of you who, don't know what 5%ers are, they're like an offshoot of the Nation of Islam. I think they refer to themselves as the nation of gods and earths. Their akida, their belief is that, the black man is God. And back in those days, we used to refer to them and they used to refer to themselves as God body. Did you used to run any old time rappers? Yeah, because I lived in Hollis, Queens. So I used to, like literally, I just give you one example. Literally, my first job with like a lot of us during that time was delivering newspapers. Nowadays old people deliver newspapers from their cars, but back in those days, that was every young kid's first legitimate job, right? And Run's father's house was on my paper route. And one time I came to collect my money and Run came through, So just to give you an idea, and Run's father's house is literally 2 blocks from the house where I grew up at. By that time, Run and DMC and all of them, they were superstars. Obviously, he wasn't living with his parents, but he just so happened to come by and visit one day while I was there collecting my money for my paper route. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I can give other similar examples, but I think that was my first time seeing a rap superstar growing up. Like, yo, Run is right here. Oh man, right? But anyway, so that was my environment, and a lot of the rappers were 5%ers. A lot of the people on the street were 5%ers, and a lot of people don't understand, because if you're not from that era, from that place, a lot of y'all think of 5%ers as more like a gang, and they were completely organized. The way a lot of you would may think of Crips and Bloods, you can't think of it like that. It was almost like a culture. Even when I grew up later on, I took on a name, and the name that I took on, people thought I was 5%, even though I wasn't, right? But that's just how much influence that they had, even if you wasn't part of them. It was nothing to come out your house and see people standing in circles and be like, what's today's mathematics, Lord? Right, calling each other Lord, right? And you had to kick your knowledge, if today was the 13th, for example, right? You would have to say today's mathematics is, knowledge, understanding, being born to blah, 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 blah. You have to, and a lot of times what they were saying didn't make no sense, but you have to, sound like you were saying something, right? So, And so a lot of, this is my influence. And also what was heavy influence during those times was the group called uh, the Ansarullah. They went by many different names. The name that I remember them most by is because a lot of books that I had that they published were called the Nubian Islamic Hebrews. But I think their most famous name is uh, uh, Ansarullah. Shout out to Imam Amin, right? But they, growing up, they were everywhere. And for those of you people who don't know who these people were, these people, at least during my time period, they wore the way you see the average Sudanese dress. That's how they dressed. They wore white thobes, usually white kufis and or white turbans. They knew Arabic. They prayed Salat in all the areas where people congregated at. So if you're in New York City during that time, and I'm from Queens, so you talk about Jamaica Avenue, the Coliseum. It's like a shopping area, a mall type area where everybody not only shopped, but hung out, congregated, whatever. And so all in front of the Coliseum, down the mall part where the Coliseum is, on Jamaica Avenue, all over the place, you will see, Ansar Allah, that's what I'm going to call them, Ansar Allah, set up with their tables, selling oils, incense, books, giving dawah. And that's just Jamaica Avenue, but it was the same place on 100, same thing like on 125th Street, same thing on in 42nd Street, same thing, in these places are in Manhattan. Same thing in the Village, Washington Square Park, West 4th Street, same thing on Albee Square Mall, same thing on just all the places where Black people congregated, that's where they would be at. And I told you how they look, right? White thobes, white kufis, turbans, kicking knowledge, selling oils and incense. Wa alaikum salam to everybody, Captain. So this was my influence, and a lot of people like in the streets, a lot of people was 5%ers. And if you're a 5%er, you don't eat pork. And I remember, I grew up just like the average Black person, African American. I remember growing up and, eating pork, ham sandwiches just like everybody else. But I remember, uh, I remember coming to school one day. This is in high school. And the cats, hold on, let me put on something. It's Do Not Disturb thing. Hold on. I remember coming up to the school, like those of you who know Queens and the schools and all that stuff. I used to go to Edison. And if you know anything about Jamaica High School, Edison High School, you got to walk up the hill to get there. We all used to congregate at the bottom of the hill. And I remember coming up and, in New York, like most of the places I live outside of New York, they call sandwiches, they call them hoagies or grinders and stuff. I really can't stand them names. You want to know why? Because I grew up eating heroes, right? And that's what we called them in New York City. So I remember I had a ham and cheese hero. I'll never forget this. I actually had a ham and cheese hero. And I'm like, a young boy, whatever, just getting down or whatever. So my man was telling me like, yo, you can't be up on this corner eating no ham and, eating no swine, man. The swine is made out of the cat, rat, and the dog. I'm like, what? Like, man, listen, if you want to eat that grafted animal, right? If you want to eat that animal, you're gonna have to do that someplace else. Like, man, I ain't moving nowhere. I'm gonna eat my sandwich right here, right? And so I ate it then, but then my man pulled me to the side, schooled me, whatever. And I was like, oh, you know what? That's deep. So from that point in time, I stopped eating pork. Now, after like make a caveat, little footnote, I wasn't going around reading labels and stuff, right? But stuff that was openly pork, like ham, pork chops, and all that kind of stuff, I wasn't eating it. I stopped eating it then. And this is like when I first got in high school. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uthman checking in right from a few feet away. Malik said, Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Antonio. Malik said, which group was larger in New York, the Ansars or the Five Percenters? I think I would say the Five Percenters because, because everybody was doing it. It was just like, it became like a fad. Not necessarily that they were organized or, like that. I think as far as organization and building and stuff like that, I think definitely the Ansar Allah. But just by sheer influence, numbers, the rappers and people like myself taking on those type of names, not even really knowing, just stuff like that. I think the Five Percenters were more pervasive. I think that's the best way to put it. And because of that, maybe they had more numbers. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Alhamdulillah. Marhaban. You caught me in the middle of a live video. No, it's good. I'll be finished soon, inshallah. Let you. I don't want you to stay outside in the sun. I'll be finished soon, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So, yeah. So, and a lot of times I notice when I mention this, a lot of people that are older than me, they be like, nah, man, the Nation of Islam was out there like that. And that could be, but I didn't notice it. Now, just because someone is there, just because, they're established, that doesn't mean necessarily that a person is going to notice them. So I don't. You leaving? No, I'm coming. Okay. So. Okay. So a lot of people because everybody wants to, how come you left them out? Because I didn't notice them like that. That's why I left them out. And I'm not saying they wasn't there or they wasn't relevant. I just didn't notice them, right? Like just like in every city where black people are at, usually we can identify, okay, if I want a bean pie or a final call, I know I can go to this intersection and one of the brothers is going to be there. For me, I couldn't tell you where that was at that time, even though I'm pretty sure they was there, but I couldn't tell you because they didn't stick out to me like that. It was those Ansars that stuck out to me like that. And even before Shahada, they were, even the Ansars, they started penetrating hip hop. I mean, those of you who are hip hop historians, like if you look at people like Jay-Z, when he first started with Jazz on, they was down with the Ansar. If you look at the group like PM, I think what's his name, PMD, it was connected with Third Base. They was Ansar. They was kicking that stuff on video, making records about it. And so they started to become even pervasive. And even their leader, Dr. York, he even had a music group, right? And I remember hearing his song on the radio. I didn't know who it was at the time, but afterwards, looking back, I remember like, yo, that was Dr. York. That song was on the radio on rotation. So a lot of these groups, they penetrated, Black America, at least in New York. So, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I mentioned all of that to show and I wrote it down. I was like, because remember, the title of this is Planting Seeds and Watching Them Sprout. And, I stopped eating pork because of the 5%ers. That's a seed right there. Not EPMD, PMD. Or maybe I got it wrong. But I'm not talking about the group from Long Island. I'm talking about these dudes, they was from Brooklyn, I think. And they came out way after EPMD. And they had a song called Peach Fuzz. I think that was the most famous song that I remember. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imam requesting travelers dua for my daughter. Her asthma has been bad this year. So KMD, Shukran, Imam Amin. Alhamdulillah. Uh, uh, Everyone that's watching now or later, please make dua for our brother Isa Abdul his daughter, uh, with regards to her asthma, especially now, you got this COVID thing going on, and that deals with your breathing and your respiratory and all that kind of stuff. So please make dua. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect your daughter and restore her health even better than before. Even though people even though people around me like think I take it lightly, but I don't. I just, I have asthma too, but I act like I don't have it. But for some people, it can be real bad. I was even hospitalized for it at least 2 or 3 times as a child. No doubt. Ansar up in the building. So, but the 5% is the reason why I stopped eating pork. Uh, I won't mention the name here, but I think one of those people who had influence in my high school is a person that Nas always shouts out in his records. And I'm pretty sure it's the same person. If it is, I think he got murdered or died or something like that. But when I got in high school, he had my high school locked down. He was a 5%. So that's one seed. So like I said in the beginning, it's not like I had an epiphany. It was just like little things was happening. Another seed that was planted, and obviously I don't know that these are seeds going on at the time. I had a girlfriend, and her friend was a Muslim. Now again, at the time, I don't know anything about Islam, not trying to learn anything about Islam. So when I say Muslim, that's relative. She could have been anything. Assalamu alaikum. She could have been anything. She could have been Ansar Allah. She could have been Nation. She could have been anything. But only thing I remember about her, she would always wear a white kimar, and I even think she wore niqab sometime. But my memory is vague. I can't remember. One time I mentioned earlier, I used to go to Edison and used to be a hill that you used to have to walk up. And so one time we was all hanging out at the bottom of the hill, and uh, my girlfriend's Muslim friend was there, and this little like corny dude, I guess he was trying to get points or something like that. He was like, "Oh man, what this B with these sheets on her head doing up over here, man? She gotta leave up out of here." And I was like, "Yo, hold up, like don't be disrespecting her like that. You don't disrespect her up on this block, right?" And right, and he was like one of my little soldiers. Like he was always trying to prove himself. And so I was like, and so we joking around, right? So I like, no, she ain't gotta leave. You gotta leave, right? And so, like, you know how you like play fighting on the block? He pulls out a knife. I take the knife from him, and this idiot tries to grab the knife back from me by the blade and cuts himself. He ends up having to go and get stitches that day. But so he goes get stitches or whatever like that, whatever. And from that time, that sister, like she came like, I thank you for, defending me. I'm like, nah, I wasn't even all that deep, bro. He's a little clown. Why like salam to that like wasn't even all that deep. He's just a little clown. Don't worry about it. She's like, no, like, he put me on the spot, whatever. Like, nah, it's all right, cool, whatever. Right. So whenever she would come around, right? We'd be standing on, just drinking 40s, doing what, ignorant people do. And this was just instinct. Nobody told me this. Like she would come and I like put the 40 away. And she'd be like, why are you hiding there? I was like, nah, I ain't want to disrespect you, whatever. Just drinking. Whatever. And she was like, well, I know you're doing it. You ain't got to hide it. I'm like, all right. I was just trying to show you some respect. And I mention that because back in those days, I mean, just think about it. A Muslim woman or a girl, she was either my age or younger, high school age, on the corner with a whole bunch of hooligans drinking and doing everything else is safe. Not because there's other Muslim brothers there, but the type of respect that it's Muslims in general, whether they be pseudo Muslim or not, had in the hood. I wasn't Muslim. And even though I know dude was playing just trying to get his little points or whatever, he ended up, not because I violently attacked her, but he ended up the one with the stitches and had to leave the corner. The Muslim girl is all right. That's how that's just an example of how the Muslims were, during that time. And I remember one time I was very angry at my girlfriend, and it almost got violent. And nobody could cool me down, right? Some people was amping me up. Other people was like, yo, chill, chill. And I wasn't about to chill. And she was the only one that was like, you need to calm down. She was the only one that I would listen to. And I didn't even know her like that. Right? So when that happened, like nobody else could calm me down. And then she was like, 'cause I thought she was cheating. What happened was earlier that day, some of my friends saw her getting out of another dude's car, and I found out about it. And they clowned me all day in school with that. If you old enough, that song MC Shan had was out. Girl, why did you have to leave me this way? You remember that song, right? These dudes was clowning me all day singing that song. Oh, your girl, she ran with another man and left you lonely. Oh my God. They was clowning me. So I was hot, right? After school, it was on, right? And so they nobody else was able to calm me down. She happened to be on the scene and she calmed me down. She walked away. She was like, and I don't know why you all upset. Because yeah, she may be foul for doing what she's doing. I'm gonna check her. But when I be walking her to school and I come back, I be seeing you with all these other girls. So why are you mad? And I was like, oh well, I mean, you put it that way, but still she can't be disrespecting me up here. People know me around here, whatever. But for some reason she had an impact on me. Fast forward a year later, I never looked at her like in a sexual way. But I saw her after high school. I was walking down Jamaica Avenue and somebody kept calling me. And I'm turning around. I don't see anybody that I know. And then the voice kept getting closer and closer and closer. And by the time I see who it is, and she's like, I've been calling you, ain't hear me? I'm like, okay. She's like, you don't remember me? And I'm like, no, you don't know me? She's like, no. I'm like, but I looked her up and down. I was like, well, I mean, I can't get to know you. I mean, but like, no, I don't know who you are. And then she was like, you remember me? The one with the sheets. I'm like, oh. And I'm saying to her, I'm like, oh, don't tell me you fell off. And she was like, no, I ain't fall off. Whatever. She have no chemo on her. And I don't remember what she looked like. I just remember thinking, man, she is bad. And I remember like it was like an awkward silence for a minute. And then I was like, so why don't you give me your number? And we exchanged numbers. Alhamdulillah, she called. I wasn't home. I ain't ever returned a phone call, whatever like that. And the amazing thing about it is I remember telling this story a couple of years later. And even back then, if you was to ask me her name, more than a general description of what she looked like, I could not tell you. I'm talking about 2 years after it happened. This is like 30 years later that I'm telling the story now, right? I remember sitting in prison telling this story, and not if she was sitting here right now looking exactly the way she looked when it happened, even though I could tell a story, I cannot tell you what she looked like. Allah completely erased her name and how she looked, or the specifically how she looked from my memory. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. But I mention that because that's a seed. And I don't want y'all to get caught up in all these. It seems like I'm telling war stories and all that. It ain't that. It's seeds that was been planted. The next one, a lot of you probably heard this story before. It's real funny. Part of it's funny. I hope you don't ever see this video. I don't know what he up to now. But I had a friend. His name was Fred, right? But everybody used to call him Father Fred. And he used to wear kufis. And he said he was Muslim. I wasn't tripping. He was doing all the stuff we was doing. And so one time I asked him, I was like, what's up with the father part? Like, Father Fred. And then, not too long after that, the singer came out, Father MC. He was like, yo, is there any relation with this? Father Fred, Father, what's up? What's going on? Stop getting jealous of her. Ain't nobody 50 years later. Right? So check what Father Fred told me. He said, I'm Muslim, but a lot of people don't understand Arabic, right? See, Abdul means father. He didn't say Abu. He said Abdul means father. And so just so that people could relate to me, I just go by the name Father Fred. I was like, all right, cool. I learned me a new word. Abdul means father. Okay, cool. And one time we were walking down Jamaica Avenue and we were drinking 40s. I just passing it back and forth. And we was coming up on one of them Ansar tables. And I had just passed it to him. And as we got close to the table, he passed me the 40 back. I'm like, yo, you ain't even drink none. He was like, nah, kind of like indicated to the table. He said, I don't want to disrespect the crown. I'm like, disrespect the crown. So I said, I'm completely naive. I'm not even trying to be funny. I'm like, oh, so you can drink as long as you don't wear your kufi? And he said, yeah. I said, man, I could be Muslim. I just never wear no kufis there. Because I think he took his kufi off when it happened. And then I passed it back to him. Well, what was going on, he ain't one of them Ansar dudes to see with a kufi or drinking 40. That's what was really going on. But I didn't know it at the time. Right? It's very important because he's a seed for me. And at the same time, while all this is going on, I'm buying Ansar books. I'm buying their books. I'm not reading them. I'm skimming them. I'm buying their books. And I started making fitra because of one of Dr. York's books. Before Islam, I started making fitra. And then I think it was a misunderstanding I had from one of his books. In one of his books, he had, Imam Amin is laughing because I left out some parts about the fitra that I'm talking about, right? Well, Imam Amin probably laughing because he probably know what part I left out. That dude was sick. But anyway, right? In one of his books, he had like a picture with somebody like this taking Shahada. He had a picture, I think, with somebody getting this water poured on him. And it was like 2 other pictures. I don't know, from other religions. And then something I think he's had on the top, Shahada. I don't know what he was trying to communicate, but I do know what I understood from that. And I understood from that taking Shahada is a process. This is what I'm thinking, right? Like maybe taking Shahada is incorporating all of these initiations from other religions, right? So maybe it's some type of baptism in there, is whatever the dude was doing with his finger and saying this thing, and maybe all that is Shahada. So in my mind, okay, this is Shahada. I got to do all these things. It's like a initiation. So long story short, after that, not long after that, I end up getting arrested, and I'm in Queen's house, and I remember my father telling me on the phone, listen, tell the people in the jail that you Muslim so they won't make you eat pork. Because if you remember, I stopped eating pork years ago, right? So I was like, okay. So I don't know what happened, but my friend who was a 5%er, his name was Ron Dew. You know, for those of y'all who are not from New York, like people just make up stuff, right? His name was Ronald. But a lot of dudes who was 5%er, if they had the name Ronald, they they changed the name to like Ron Dew or something like that. Or Ron Allah. So you know they just make up stuff, right? So I remember being in his cell, and he was like, "So you thinking about?" I forgot how the conversation started. I really don't remember, but he was like, "Well, I thought you was always Muslim," meaning 5%. So, well, I can help you out with that. I could teach you about being Muslim. I was like, "Hold on, let me get a pen." So he said, "First, you have to understand the supreme mathematics, knowledge." So, okay, number one, knowledge. Number two, wisdom. Number three, understand. I'm writing all this stuff down, Coach of Freedom Power. I'm writing all this stuff down, right? Alhamdulillah. A brother that I did not notice up until that time must have been ear hustling. Because we was in his cell. And he was like, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt. But did I hear you say that you was thinking about becoming Muslim? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm Muslim. Maybe I can help you out with that. So I was like, all right. You know, it was, you know, he was real respectful. So, you know, we ain't, you know, tripping that he, you know, just, you know, intruded in on our conversation. And he was like, uh, Assalamu alaikum. I didn't know how to say wa alaikum salam. So I was like, yeah, peace. And he looked at me a little bit. He was like, do you make salat? I said, make some what? He said, you make salat. I'm like, I don't make what? He said, do you pray? I said, yeah. I pray all the time. And so I think at that moment he realized I really wasn't no Muslim. And then he was like, you know, to be a Muslim. And I really don't remember exactly what he said, but I'm assuming that he ran down the 5 pillars to me. And then he said, when we pray, we say this. He said something in Arabic. So I'm assuming he said that he said the Fatiha, but I don't remember. And then he was like, yeah, you know, brother Muhammad is Muslim. And there's this other dude that used to run with us. He didn't give us, this brother Muhammad, he didn't give us no dawah, nothing. Whenever we did dirt, he was there. And but I do remember him making salat at the end of the tier, right? But you know, that's the only Islam I saw in him. And so and this brother, his name was Nigel. He said, there ain't a lot of Muslims here. You know, we kind of weak here. And again, this is Queen's house. He said, well, nine times out of 10, when you get out of here, you're going to go to Rikers Island. You're going to be in C-73. The Muslims are strong there. When you get there, you know, get with the Muslims there. They'll be able to teach you and, you know, make sure that you good. I'm going to move because I think the sun is starting to beat down on this thing. And I don't want it to overheat. Yeah, okay, I'm in the shade now. So I said, okay. And so, you know, I didn't want to be too pushy, but I was like, you know, I gotta wait till I get to C73. I just do the Shahada now. And so, but I mentioned what he said is extremely important because number one, it's a seed. Number two, this brother Nigel, he saw somebody about to mislead me, and he didn't let it go down. He politely interrupted, gave me real Islam, and then gave me some clear instructions. And so I made a note to write that down. A lot of times we tell people the truth, and then sometimes, we expect that people will know what to do with the truth. No, sometimes you got to give people instruction. You have to tell them what to do. And so the exact same thing, what he said happened. After a while, I got transferred to Rikers Island, went to C73, and I think I must have forgot what he told me for a short period of time. Because I don't know, I must have been looking for something. I remember like this Christian dude used to come around to the dorms and the cell blocks and stuff, and they would be reading from the Bible and stuff. And so I came and sat in the circle for a couple of times, and I didn't realize it until I was preparing my thoughts for this video. But the same questions I asked him was the same questions I asked my mother that time. Those who know me, I tell this story all the time. One time, my father didn't go to church with us, and I just went with my mom's, and I was cutting up, because my father was the disciplinarian. So father ain't there, I could feel a little bit more loose. So I remember sitting in church, and I just picked up the Bible. I was bored. So while he was preaching, I was start reading from Genesis. And I don't remember what I read, but I remember asking my mother, Mommy, who's God? She was like, Jesus, Jesus. So that didn't sit right. So I was like, Mommy, who's the Son of God? He said, shh, be quiet, boy, Jesus. Then I'm like, who's the Holy Spirit? He said, Moses. I was like, all right. And when I was preparing for this video, I said, SubhanAllah, because I wasn't all into theology like that. So I wasn't like never tripping. So when that dude, his name was Mike, he used to go around, trying to, proselytize. And I asked him the same questions. And that had to be at least more than 10 years later. I asked him the same questions. And I tried to be as polite as possible. I was like, I'm having a problem understanding like the Trinity. Like it just like really, it don't. Can you explain it to me so I can understand? And this dude actually got offended. Like he got like uptight, and I'm like, I told my friend like, this nigga getting uptight for? Like you ain't even tough. Like I don't even respect you like that. You getting uptight, right? Like what's wrong with you? Like you should be happy I'm asking you questions. And so I was like, I'm through. I was like, man, you got any Muslims in this dorm? We was in a dorm this time. We was in a cell block. You say, yeah, this is Muhammad over there. And there's another brother named Muhammad, not the Muhammad I mentioned earlier. Muhammad was sitting on his bed. He had his legs crossed. He had one of the big fat Yusuf Ali translations of the Quran. It was wrapped up in a towel and he was reading it. And so the Christian dude brought me to Muhammad. And he waited till Muhammad acknowledged his presence, finished reading the Quran, closed it up. He was like, yeah, this young brother right here, he wants to learn about Islam. So he was like, oh, alhamdulillah. Sit down. And so I don't remember what he told me, but he said, we going to the masjid tomorrow, the mosque, whatever, so you can come to class, whatever. I was like, all right, cool, man. So we can start this Shahada process. Remember, in my mind, I'm thinking Shahada is a process. The next day, I go to, I'm waiting for the call out, and Muhammad ain't said nothing to me all day. So I approached him. I was like, hey, are you still going to class? Can I go with you? He was like, oh, you still want to go? I was like, yeah, that's what I said, right? I guess he was seeing if I was serious or not. So I went with him to class. I don't remember anything from the class. I just remember that when we was getting ready to go back, everybody's getting ready to go back to their cell blocks or their dorms or whatever, that the brothers was arguing about something and they was about to fight. So Muhammad looked at me like embarrassed, like, do you still want to take your shahada? Right? And I was like, yeah, that's what I came here for. Like I wouldn't even think about fighting. We black folk, we do that all the time. Right? I wouldn't even think about that. I was just waiting for them to get to me to start this shahada process. So he was like, for real? You still want to take shahada? I was like, yeah. And so he said, all right, we're gonna give you a shahada and get back to the dorm. All right. So we get back to the dorm. Muhammad gathers up all the Muslims in the dorm. And he was like, all right, which one of y'all is gonna give him shahada? They was like, no, Muhammad, you the sheikh, give him shahada. I think they said Muhammad was from Africa. I don't remember which country, whatever. So he was like, no, I can't give him shahada. I was like, why you can't give him shahada? He was like, because if he turns out to be a bad Muslim, then the sin is on me. That's not the last time I heard that either. I don't know where people get that idea from. But in any case, so I'm sitting there. I'm not offended or nothing. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm just going with the flow. So the head of security in C-73 was an older brother. At the time, I thought his name was Sheikh because that's what they called him, Sheikh. I didn't know Sheikh was a title, Sheikh, right? And I don't know too much about him, but at that time, he had to be at least 50 years old at that time. And they called him. And just by, in hindsight, looking at his demeanor, if you was to ask me to guess, like, what was his orientation in Islam, I would guess that he came out of the nation. That's just the way he carried himself. And so they told Sheikh, or I think his first name was Gais, told him, this young brother wants to take Shahada, but Muhammad don't want to give it to him. It's like, why Muhammad don't want to give it to him? What's going on? So, because if he don't become a good Muslim, the sin is going to be on him. I think Sheikh cursed, or Gais cursed. I think he said, man, y'all niggas is crazy, man. I'll give him Shahada. Move over. You want to become Muslim, brother? I was like, yeah. He was like, man, listen, did these brothers explain to you about the 5 pillars and everything? I said, yeah. He said, so you sure you want to do this on your own will? I was like, yeah. He said, man, lift your finger up, man, and repeat after me. And so I Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, 3 times, right? It was like, everybody's like, Takbir, Allahu Akbar, God, Muslim, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah. So that's where I became Muslim. I don't remember the exact month. It seemed like it's amazing. It seemed like some of the most important events in my life. I don't remember the exact date. I just remember it was the fall of 1991. So it had to be September, October. It had to be September, October, or November. I'm leaning more towards October or November of 1991, right? So, alhamdulillah, I took Shahada. And so I'm like, all right, what's next on the process? It was like, process? That's it, you Muslim. Now you gotta learn how to pray, right? And I'm assuming they told me to make ghusl. I don't remember, but okay, you gotta learn the Fatiha and stuff. I'm like, all right, what's the process? Like, ain't there something else I gotta do? It's like, nah, man, what you talking about? You Muslim now, that's it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I remember calling home and I told my father, I said, Daddy, I became Muslim. I said, Daddy, I became Muslim. He said, man, boy, you been Muslim. I said, no. I'm a real Muslim. I took Shahada. And he said, oh, okay. He said, how you say? He said, okay, that's what you want to do. As long as you know, ain't no such thing as a halfway Muslim. You either do it all the way or don't do it at all. I was like, I know. And so that's the only part I remember about the full conversation. Then I found out I had a cousin in there, big time drug dealer from Harlem. He was Muslim. And I hadn't seen him in a long time. I ended up almost fighting him on a basketball court a few days before I took Shahada. Or either when I forgot. But anyway, we found out that we was cousins and first cousins at that, and but found out, but I didn't know he was Muslim. He wasn't really practicing like that. And then actually the Muslims, they saw me talking to him, and they tried to warn me away from hanging around bad Muslims like that. I was like, man, that's my family, man. I ain't cutting off my family. But anyway, uh, I remember shortly after that, they was like, you got to pick a name. So they gave me a book of names, right? And so I narrowed it down to two. Uh, one of them was Fahim, and the other one was Naeem. And so, I'm trying to be. First, I wanted to keep my street name. They're like, nah, man, you got to pick an Arabic name. All right, so then I got the equivalent of the street name that I had. I was like, no, I'm trying to change myself. Let me be humble. So then it came down to Fahim or Naeem. And then I said, you know what? Go with Naeem. Naeem is more humble than Fahim, in my opinion at the time. So I picked Naeem. And then so the brothers was trying to teach me, when you pick an attribute, you got to put Abdul in front of it. So I'm like, I'm not going to say they explained it to me wrong. I'm going to say I misunderstood what they was trying to tell me. So, and I think I still have it. Samir, if you're watching, I think I have an old Pickthall Quran. If the cover's still on it. If the cover's still on it, you're going to see I write my name in the covers of all my books. That started when I first took Shahada, right? I put Abdullah Naeem because I picked the name Naeem. Because I misunderstood what the brothers was telling me, I put Abdullah in front of it. So I said, okay. So my first name was Abdullah, and then my last name was Naeem. And then at some point, somebody corrected it for me. So then I put a comma between it, between Abdullah and Naeem, indicating that Naeem is first name, right? And so if I still have that Quran, that English translation, I believe it's a Pickthall. The reason why it says Abdullah, comma Naeem, that's why. So I remember sitting on my bed with my Muslim brothers, and I wasn't sentenced yet, and so I'm thinking like, no, so we just like sitting, just not talking Dean and I, just they like, how I feel to be a new Muslim. I said, feel real good, alhamdulillah. I don't know if I said alhamdulillah, but that's the spirit. I was like, man, feel good, feel even better if I beat this case or don't get a lot of time. I said, when I get home, I'm gonna get tore down. Meaning I'm gonna get drunk. I'm gonna drink khamr, intoxicants, right? Remember, I'm Muslim. I just took Shahada, right? Usually, almost everybody knows Muslims don't drink, right? So they looked at me like as if I was joking. And I noticed them looking at me. I'm like, why y'all looking at me like that? I said, I know what y'all saying. Y'all see, y'all don't think I know anything about Islam. See, I understand. See, when I get home and get drunk, I just ain't gonna never wear no kufi. They looking at me like, what? What are you talking about? If you remember what I talked about earlier, I told you I had a friend named Father Fred, and he took off the kufi and passed me the 40. Him, I really believe what he said. So I thought Muslims can drink khamr as long as they don't wear kufis. And so they looking at me like, nah, kid, you gotta be joking. I'm like, no, I'm serious. No, my man's in the street, he Muslim. And we used to drink all the time. It's just that you don't drink with your kufi on. I know I ain't completely ignorant. They're like, no, man, you can't drink with your kufi, can't get drunk. Muslims don't drink at all, period. And so they were like, and so I was like, for real? They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I trust y'all. All right. And then, since I'm Muslim now, I have my mother send books up. My Muslim books. Those Muslim books were what? Imam Amin's books. No, I mean Dr. York's books, right? The Ansar Allah books, right? I had about 3 of them. And so I got them. And I don't remember how they came on the package or a visit. I forgot, but I got them, and I was happy. I got some books now, so I can, I'm Muslim now for real. Got my books. And Muhammad, the one who I considered back, I didn't know the term at the time, but he was like my sheikh. He seen me, he's like, "What you doing with them books?" I said, "No, my mom sent them up to me. I'm about to go in. Like, you can't read that." I'm like, "These are my books." And he like, "You can't read that. Give it to me." He talked to me like I'm a little kid. I'm like, "Listen," like me and him about to get in an argument. He like, "Listen, you're not gonna understand it now, but you will thank me later. I'm not letting you read these books. And if you want to get mad at me or fight me, then so be it. But I'm not letting you read these books." And so he took the books from me. All right. And I thank him for it. I thank him for it now. I think he eventually gave them back to me. And after I learned a little bit more. But so in conclusion, because I got some people waiting for me. Uh so if y'all have any questions, type them in now so it won't be no delay. But I think it's important that I mention the type of Islam that I was exposed to. Because you talk about 1991 when I took Shahada. So in New York State and New York City, in the prison and jail systems, almost all, I said almost, not all, but a lot or the majority of the chaplains, the Muslim chaplains that worked in the jails and prisons were from Imam Wardi Muhammad's community. Not all, because I can even name some who I came in their facilities and they weren't, but they basically ran it, New York City and New York State. As far as the books that we had exposed to, I wrote down some of the staples, and in most of the jails and prisons in New York City and state, there was always a room. We call it a masjid, but it was always a room that was usually for the Muslims. Like, only Muslims go there. We have classes, Juma, and everything else there. And it was only for the Muslims. You didn't share with no one else. Uh, and so there was a facility here or there that didn't have that, but most of them had their own space for Muslims, and we call it the masjid. Uh, Obviously, you had Qur'ans in those libraries in those places. And at those times, it was the Yusuf Ali translation, and also you had the King Fahd translation. The Noble Quran translation didn't come out till I remember. I remember my first time seeing it was when I first learned how to read Arabic, and that was I did 4 years, so that was like in my third year. I think that had to be like 1993 or something like that. That's my first time seeing it, right? So you had those two main translations of Quran. Uh, you had Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. You know the translations that have been out for a while that we know of, like Muhammad Muslim Khan, and the English 4-volume translation, Siddiqui, something like that. That's what was common. The book Halal and Haram in Islam by Yusuf Qaradawi. Milestones. The meaning of Quran. Oh, Sheikh, you ain't leaving, are you? Okay. Alhamdulillah. Okay, inshallah. The meaning of the Quran by Maududi, that 8-volume one. Mubadi Islam. And I think the most important out of all of them wasn't even a book. It was a photocopy of a chapter of a book. I just call it the prayer pamphlet, because about 95% of us learned how to make salat out of this pamphlet. It was photocopied a whole bunch, and actually came across it recently, and I made a copy just for nostalgia purposes, because this is where I learned my prayer from, and my wife knows what I'm talking about. I have it in my library somewhere. Uh, it right next to the other Wahhabi books on the top shelf. uh, Kazi Publication based in Chicago was big back exactly. Uh, and I remember I was one of those people who brought books. I wasn't just completely satisfied with whatever books the masjid had, but I ordered books, especially when I got upstate. I ordered books, from, I remember it was a company called Crescent Imports or Crescent International, whatever. I remember one of the books I brought was like Women in Islam, Milestones Towards Understanding Islam, those type of books. Uh, so if you consider any of the books I mentioned, right, that tells you where our influences came from. Like it wasn't like really nobody teaching no traditional Islam up in there. It was just, uh, what back those were during the days where, like, at least amongst the prisoners, whoever knew the most Arabic, that was the sheikh. Even if he didn't know how to read, if he could recognize the letters and there was nobody above him that could read, he was the sheikh. That's why after about 3 years, I remember when I went to about 8 different prisons, and I remember one of my early teachers that helped me. He really, like, after this point where I took Shahada and I got sentenced, I went to C-74, which is like the adolescent building. But you have non-adolescents, meaning 19 or older, who's waiting to get, transferred upstate. So I was one of those. And in that jail, I learned the rest of my salat and, like the 5 pillars, all the basic Islam. And our main teacher was a brother named Saeed. And he didn't wait for classes that happen in the masjid. We had classes in the dorm because we had a lot of Muslims in the dorm. And so, like, 3 years later, uh, I'm upstate. I come into my last facility, and I had just got there, and so I'm going to the masjid, about to walk into the yard, cross the yard, go to the masjid, and I see a brother that I seen in the last facility that I'm in, and I see Saeed, the brother who taught me so much in the beginning, walking towards me at the same time. And the Spanish brother who saw me, who recognized me, he was like, "Oh, Allahu Akbar, the Sheikh is here." And so Saeed seeing this, he like, "Sheikh, like, man, I remember you ain't know nothing." And so he, that's another whole long story. But I'm not a sheikh now, but then among certain people, one-eyed man is, the king in the land of the blind. So he considered me like a person of knowledge or what have you. And so Saeed began to question me about what I know and all that kind of stuff. And that was a whole that leads to a whole other set of good experiences that I had, in my year coming the year before I came home. But the point that I wanted to make, that I wanted to emphasize, like, there was nobody, like, going through Akhdari. There was nobody going through Ashmawiya or the Risala. That stuff was unheard of. Most of us didn't even know what a madhab was. Even though, like, that prayer pamphlet I mentioned, that was basically from a book teaching how to make prayer based upon the Hanafi school. So, and that's the way a lot of us learn. But most of us couldn't tell you what a Hanafi was. Uh, if we read that whole little pamphlet, we could tell you maybe the names of the imams and the day, year, and the dates that they lived and died. But that's about it. Nobody was teaching, Umdatu Salik like, Imam Amin is doing. Nobody's teaching Aqidah at Tahawi. Nobody's teaching these basic things. We're learning these, because remember, this is 1991 through 1995 when I came home. If you know your history, a lot of the people who really laid down the Salafi or the Wahhabi Dawah, in the United States, if you know your timeline, most of these people are still studying overseas. They hadn't gotten back yet. Matter of fact, I remember one of the chaplains, he brought in a video of one of the more famous ones while he was still studying. And I remember he said some wild stuff during that video, but like he said that you know dividing the Quran up into 30 parts is a bid'ah, so we shouldn't do that. We should just read, and when Ramadan comes, you don't read 1/30th of the. I remember I actually listened to that, and during that time, I that year that I listened to that, I didn't finish reading the Quran. But anyway, uh, mashallah. But so just to give you like again, I mentioned the books that were staples there. You know those two translations of the Quran, Yusuf Ali, King Fahad. You was doing it way big if you had all 5 volumes of the English translation of Fiqh Sunnah, and if you know Fiqh Sunnah, those 5 volumes aren't the complete translation of the book. But anyway, the 5 volumes is translated in English, right? Right. So your masjid library was doing it way big if it had Fiqh Sunnah and a full set of Bukhari without no volumes missing. Same thing with Muslims. And Halal and Haram in Islam by Yusuf Qaradawi. And the other books that I mentioned, if you know anything about, the authors and the movements that those authors represent, you got the Ikhwanul Muslimin, you got Jamati Islamiyah, basically Egypt, Pakistan, and then you got and you got a lot of Wahhabi influences there. At the time, nobody was calling themselves Salafi, nobody was calling themselves Wahhabi. We just all thought we were Muslim, and we wasn't Nation of Islam, we wasn't 5%ers, or we wasn't none of that stuff. So in conclusion, I told all of these war stories because I don't have no like epiphany, like one moment where I was searching for, Islam, and I looked for it, and that's how I came upon it. And when I look back about how or what motivated me to become Muslim, all of these things come to my mind. You know, the impact of the 5% movement, and just in general, but specifically is because of them that I stopped eating pork. Uh, Also, the Ansar Allah, and I forgot to mention that in my mind at the time, the way a Muslim looks and acts, if you was to ask me to point to what a Muslim looks and acts like, it would have been Ansar. In other words, white thobe, white kufi, and or white turban, smelling good, intellectual, and not disconnected from the streets. And I can tell a whole lot of stories about that. But in any case, that was my image of what a Muslim was. I didn't have images of bow ties and suits, whatever. I just, sorry for all of you who may be offended that I didn't mention the Nation of Islam. I just don't remember them like that. Even though I know they definitely was there, I just don't remember them like that. So all of these things, were seeds that were planted. And, I felt like, all it took was somebody like that brother Nigel that, I feel like Allah was guiding me to Islam, and I had all these crazy misunderstandings and concoctions and stuff running around in my head. And it just took someone to say, listen, this is what you need to do. When you go here, get with the Muslims, they on it, they'll tell you what to do. And I end up doing exactly that, and I ended up taking shot. And so that's my conversion story. And these things, especially when you travel to the Muslim world, you have to understand, or Africa or any place else. Think about it. When you go to the Muslim world or in the African continent, their image of African Americans is what they see on TV. And you know how we depict it on TV. So when they hear about our stories, and all of us have a story, my story is not special. I can think of a whole bunch of people who got more special stories than me. But when they hear any one of our stories, and then they see us in the flesh, in the Muslim lands, as Muslims, they look at us like we miracles. Like, wait a minute, hold up. They took Islam from your ancestors. They enslaved y'all, enforced y'all, made y'all forget your languages, made you forget your deen and everything else like this. And you still came back to Islam. And then like when you go to a lot of Muslim countries, you know, a lot of us are kind of like super Muslim to them. A lot of because like a lot of them Islam is in their culture, but they not can't necessarily point to like a lot of us we study and you know we know the difference between halal and makruh and mubah and mandub and wajib or whatever. A lot of them they just something that this is just like they just say haram, like, and you like haram, that ain't haram, whatever. But I'm just giving an example. So, but in any case, a lot of them look at us like only Allah can do this. His ancestors went through that, and he grew up in a place like that, and he became Muslim and is practicing. Only Allah can do that. And so, I say that just to remind us, like your story could be a benefit to someone. It could encourage someone. It may make them appreciate what they have. They've been born with this, or their parents are Muslims, or they've been living here for, been Muslim for hundreds or even 1,000 years, and are lacking. And here it is. You had Islam taken from your family, and you came back to it with all types of deviation thrown at you, and you still emerge as a Muslim and practice it. And so, don't belittle your own story, inshallah. I'm going to get out of here because I got guests waiting for me, inshallah. I pray that this was beneficial, and I hope that you didn't get caught up in the war stories and get, and I couldn't mention those things without giving you the context. So, but I wasn't like gloating and just telling my little war stories. I left out a lot of details, right? And my wife knows those details. That's why she got on here all right, right? Calm down, you be all right. So, you going? Inshallah. Shukran for coming. Baraka. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We come visit you soon before I leave. Inshallah. I still got more guests. Anyway, my sister-in-law. No one should be offended. You're sharing your experience, and I've enjoyed it. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sheikh Naeem, very inspirational. Thanks for sharing. Alhamdulillah. I hope it's an inspiration. And one of the points that I wanted to mention is that if you think about, and this is just me as one individual, these are people affecting me and planting seeds about Islam in me, and I'm not even knowing it, and they not knowing it. So this should be a lesson for us that we need to be careful about how we act. Number one, Allah is always aware of us and seeing us, but we don't know what type of seeds we are planting in people's heads about Islam. Can you imagine if no one checked me about getting drunk and I just come home and never buy a kufi because I want to get drunk all the time? Can you imagine that? You know, and I didn't even mention the whole part about the fitra and the Dr. York thing, right? Can you imagine if nobody corrected me, or if nobody told the truth? That's why it's important to tell the truth from the beginning. Don't think it's too much for somebody. No, tell them the truth. Yes, make it palatable so they can understand it, but don't dilute. Don't tell half the truth. Tell the truth. And because time running out, I'll tell us one experience before I go. Muhammad, the one that didn't want to give me shahada, we used to have a term in the prisons in New York called short eyes. Short eyes. I don't think anybody knows if the term is supposed to be short ice, like cold water, or short eyes, like eye, right? But short eyes, whatever it is, was like a slang for porno magazines, right? So you in the dorm setting, dudes in jail, they going in the middle of the night, doing what they do, right? As a Muslim, obviously, we don't do that, right? So I remember getting up to go to the bathroom, brand new shahada. And I go into the bathroom. I forgot what time it was, late at night. It had to be after 12. And the stalls are right adjacent to the sinks. So I come out the stall and I'm washing my hands and I see another stall open and the dude come to the sink and it's Muhammad. And he got a magazine with him and his towel and his stitcher bottle and his, toilet paper. I'm like, and so that almost broke my heart. And then Muhammad scolded me. He was like, no, what you seeing ain't right, right? And he's like, you know, I forgot his exact words, but he like talking to me like a little kid, right? That's not. I mentioned one incident when he did that with my Dr. York books, right? But he's like, listen, what you saw is wrong, and what I'm doing is wrong, but it's not Islam. It's not part of Islam. And you have to make a distinction between when you see a Muslim doing something wrong and Islam. So I don't want you to think that okay, Islam, something's wrong, man. No, something's wrong with me, not Islam. And he's yelling at me, telling me something's wrong with him, right? But alhamdulillah for Brother Muhammad, because I always made that distinction. Some people now they see a Muslim do something wrong and they it just crushes them with regards to their Islam. So alhamdulillah, Allah put those brothers in my path, and I thank Allah for each and every one of them. Alhamdulillah. And so I pray that this was a benefit and you got some lessons. And so my journey to Islam, it wasn't like an epiphany or one-time thing. I believe there was the results of a whole bunch of seeds that were planted in my subconscious. And these seeds, sprouted later on and led me to take my Shahada. Barakallah feek. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Well, may Allah bless all of you, and thank you for taking your time with me and being patient with all the war stories. And and I hope you got the bigger benefit. It's not the story; it's the seeds that was planted. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.